Perhaps me saying that I took Allie to her room is putting it lightly. What happened was she practically attacked me and kissed me passionately, and then she basically pushed me into her room, and fortunately for me I found out that she's actually 18 years old, thank God. Anyway, after she pushed me into her room she had sex with me so much that she didn't want to stop. She moaned loudly and had massive orgasms, and then finally her mother asked her, "What's wrong, honey?" And then Allie screamed and said, "I'm fucking my new boyfriend, leave me alone." And then Allie had a massive orgasm, and then she finally passed out and she said, "Oh fuck, that felt so fucking good." And then I said, "You're bleeding." And then she said, "I was a virgin, you dummy." And then I said, "I didn't know." And then she said, "I don't know what came over me after I saw you kill that monster. I wanted to fuck you really bad. For some reason I just couldn't control myself anymore." And then she started giving me oral pleasure, and then I moaned loudly and my mind broke and I had a massive orgasm, and then I came in Allie's mouth, and then Allie swallowed my cum. And then after I finally got done having sex with Allie my penis became very sore, and I said, "Oh God, I thought I was invincible and I thought I didn't get tired, but it seems I need to start training my private parts now somehow." And then Allie came downstairs and she said, "Come back to bed," and she grabbed my crotch gently, and then I winced in pain and she asked me, "Are you alright?" And then I said, "Well, I'm a bit sore for some reason. Apparently I'm not used to having sex with a woman that much." And then Allie smiled like a big pervert, and then she kissed me passionately and she said, "Let's take a warm shower that will help you." And then I took a shower with Allie and I slowly had sex with her again, and Allie's naughty mother sneaked a peek at us and I knew someone else was watching us having sex, but I didn't care. I just continued having sex with Allie and I enjoyed it a lot. And the next day Allie woke up and she kissed my cheek and she went to school and she said, "Please don't go too far, you gorgeous man." And then she spanked my muscular sweaty butt. And while Allie was at school her friends noticed a certain glow and open behavior around handsome young men. She no longer got nervous around handsome boys. And then Sienna and her other friend Brooke walked up to her and she said, "Oh you bitch, you got laid, didn't you? I can tell. Tell me everything." And then Allie told her friend Brooke about how she met me and how handsome I am and that I saved her life from a murdering psychopath, that Art the clown maniac. And for some reason I just felt so strangely attracted to him after he killed that maniac Art the clown in front of me that I just couldn't resist anymore. I wanted to jump his bones, and it's like my animal instincts took over or something. And then I just had sex with him for 5 days straight. And then Brooke said, "Girl, you better get on birth control or something because you're definitely pregnant." And then Allie smiled and bit her bottom lip almost sexually and she said, "I don't know why, but I don't have a problem with having his kids. I actually want to get pregnant by him many times and have his children." And Brooke said, "You bitch, you're in love with him." And then Allie smiled warmly and she said, "Trust me, if you saw him you would be in love with him too." And then I showed up at Allie's school and I waved hi to Allie, and then Brooke asked Allie, "Is that him?" And then Allie said yes excitedly, and then Brooke said, "Damn, he is handsome and muscular." And Brooke said, "Damn, he's fine." And Sienna Shaw just continued staring at me, and then I walked up to her friends and then Allie introduced me to her friends, and then I said, "I came here to pick you up because I need to talk to you about everything." And then Allie smiled warmly at me and she said, "Okay." And then she giggled cutely, and then as Allie walked away and smiled at Brooke, Brooke mouthed the words "you bitch" silently, and then Brooke said, "Oh my God, baby, that's a handsome man." And then Sienna Shaw said, "Yes, he is, and I'm going to see if I can fuck him too." And then Brooke scowled and said, "Oh my God, he's with Allie and they have been having sex for 5 days straight, honey, and he probably doesn't want you that way, and besides, aren't you too young for him?" And then Sienna Shaw said, "Actually, I just turned 18 recently." And then Sienna Shaw smiled like a pervert in my direction, and then Sienna Shaw said, "I'm going to do it. I definitely want to have sex with him." And then Brooke said, "Whatever, something is wrong with you too." And then Sienna Shaw said, "There's nothing wrong with me, he's very handsome and I want to fuck him." And then Brooke said, "Okay, whatever." And then she walked off, and then Sienna Shaw secretly thought of dressing up in her new warrior costume and showing up at Allie's, and then she said, "Yes, that will work." And then right after Allie found out the truth that I'm rich and she's pregnant, we had sex again.